Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to this rental kitchen because we've been on a break. I had a baby, he's now 3 months old, and there's a lot going on where we live. It's kind of baby central, but we're very dedicated to coming back with more episodes. So I'm making hoagie rolls and we're gonna make a very, very classic New York sandwich called a chopped cheese. It's gonna be really fun. Very happy to be back. So I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm not actually very well versed in the different dialects of what you call these rolls. I actually know them as hoagies living in New York. Today I'm making a chopped cheese, which originated in New York, specifically in bodegas in Harlem. If you think about a cheeseburger and a cheesesteak, this is sort of a hybrid. Basically, you take a hamburger patty, you put it on a flat top or a griddle, you chop it up, you add some cheese. The cheese has to get mixed into the chopped up beef. That's really important, that's key. And then it gets slathered on a hoagie roll with, I like the works, lettuce, tomato, ketchup, and mayo. So good. So I am making the bread for the rolls, obviously, and I'm making the chopped cheese. So for the rolls, I have 4 cups of, this is an all-purpose flour, but it's King Arthur, so it's pretty high protein. You can use bread flour. Then I have 6 tablespoons of milk, a large egg, kosher salt, a teaspoon and a half of instant yeast, 2 teaspoons of sugar, water, a little bit of oil. That's for the bread. Then for putting together the chopped cheese, I have a 6-ounce beef patty, some American cheese, lettuce and tomato. I'm gonna add an onion, which is not actually normally in a chopped cheese, but I'm just gonna add it because I love onion. Then mayo, ketchup, salt, pepper, a little oil for the griddle. So special equipment. I'm using a griddle to make the chopped cheese, but I'm also using it as a baking steel. So I have the made-in carbon steel griddle. It's preheating in my oven. I have my stand mixer with the dough hook, so you're gonna need that. It's a very stiff dough, so it helps to have the mixer to work it, because otherwise it requires kind of a lot of elbow grease. I have a kitchen scale, a spray bottle of water, which is helpful for this, a bench scraper. The bench scraper is there actually to help me make the chopped cheese when I'm chopping up the patty on the griddle, but also for the dough. Oh, and then I have a lame. This is important. So this is what I'm gonna use. Hoagie rolls have usually a single long slash down the center. So that's what I'm gonna use. This is called a lame for bread making. Before I get into the recipe, I wanna thank my friends at Made In for sponsoring this episode. Made In is a maker of multiple lines of incredible cookware, but today I'm using their carbon steel griddle. I've made breakfast sandwiches, I've done breakfast for a crowd, patty melts, anything you can make on a flat top, you can make on the Made In carbon steel griddle, but I love it because it's about half the weight of cast iron. It has ergonomic handles for easily moving around. Today I'm gonna be using it as actually both a baking steel and a cook surface, which I'm super excited about. Made in Sweden, heats up and cools down faster than cast iron. It's just so versatile. It can go in the oven, it can go on the stovetop. I've cooked over live fire with it. It works on induction, which I have at home. Fits across 2 burners, so just an incredibly versatile piece of equipment. You can see I've used this one a whole lot. So thank you so much to Made In for sponsoring this episode. Check out the link in the description below for a discount off your order. And now let's get back to hoagie rolls and chopped cheese. So for the dough for hoagie rolls, I'm making a dough that is neither lean nor very enriched. So a lean dough refers to a dough with no fat in it, flour, salt, water, yeast, that's it. And then you have very enriched dough that's like brioche with tons of eggs and butter. So this is leaning toward lean, but it is a little bit enriched with fat because hoagie dough, it's also a lower moisture dough. So it's a very, very firm dough. Very easy to work with, really fun. Because with hoagies, you want kind of a crisp exterior and a somewhat soft but still sturdy interior because it has to hold up to all of the fillings. And so you want that contrast between structure but also tenderness. And when you add fat, you get tenderness. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that this dough has an egg, a little bit of oil, and a little bit of milk. So I'm gonna start with my flour. And this recipe is scaled for 6 or 7 hoagie rolls, depending on the size. A hoagie roll has a sort of light golden but not shiny exterior, so there's no egg wash. So I'm adding a little bit of sugar, which does help facilitate browning. So that's gonna go in. I'm adding my yeast, a teaspoon and a half of instant yeast, which you I really like is you can just add it directly to your ingredients. You don't have to proof it first. Then this is kosher salt. It's 10 grams. It's 2% by weight of the flour. So that's going in. Then I'm gonna make a little well in the center. Oh, by the way, this is important. This is a dough that you could make it same day and let it, bulk ferment and then divide, shape, proof, and bake all in one day. But it really benefits from an overnight cold fermentation in the fridge, which is what we're gonna do. So I have a dough that I already made. But it also is helpful just to break up the amount of work. So I'm gonna add my water. It's 150 grams of water. You might need a little excess water to help bring the dough together, but as I said, it's a low hydration dough, so meaning like low proportion of water to flour, so a very stiff dough. Then I have 6 tablespoons of whole milk. That little bit of fat in the milk is a tenderizer. The milk has like a little bit of lactic acid, also a tenderizer. 1 whole egg. So also sort of lightly enriching the dough. Then I have 2 tablespoons of neutral oil. The oil helps to create tenderness and like suppleness. Now it's that low hydration dough is what's going to create that tight crumb that we want in hoagie rolls. So I'm gonna plug this into my mixer. And just let it go. And I'm gonna watch it because I might need to add a little bit of extra moisture to bring it together. We want a very stiff, firm, but smooth and supple dough. So just keep it on the lowest speed. So the dough is coming together. You can see it looks a little bit shaggy. Last night when I was making this, I added a little bit of extra water to help bring it together. So I'm gonna do that again. It was just a tablespoon. But again, it's a really firm dough. So it's not sticky. It is pretty easy to handle, but it's such a firm dough that it is actually, I find, difficult to work by hand to the point that you want it, which is like very, very smooth and supple. So I think it's easier to let the mixer do the work for you. So this is just gonna come together and then we're gonna continue to mix it and keeping it on the lowest speed until I have like a cohesive, firm, smooth dough. And that's gonna take like, especially on the lowest speed, like 8 to 10 minutes of mixing. I'm gonna add a little more water. After maybe close to 10 minutes in the mixer, this is what the dough looks like. It's a really easy to work with dough. There's a softness to it, like I can, easily mold it with my hands, but it's not sticky and it's super smooth. You can see like no sticking to the sides of the bowl. So this is what it looks like. Oftentimes I like to just give it a couple final kneads. Just knead it a few times on the work surface to bring it together. But you can see it's very, very smooth and it's nice and elastic. And it's been worked pretty well, so it does kind of push back as I work it. The idea is you're developing gluten, you're giving the bread structure, and that's pretty much it. So what I want to do is just form this into a ball. And now I'm going to put it back into the mixing bowl. Gonna just hit the bowl with a little bit of oil. And this dough is gonna go right back inside, rounded side up. I'm gonna cover it. And then because it's pretty cold in here, I'm gonna let this sit out at room temp for about an hour just to kind of jumpstart fermentation and then throw it into the fridge where it's gonna continue to rise and I'm gonna let it go overnight. But of course I have a swap that I'm gonna bring out and show you so we can bake the hoagies now, today. Okay, this sat out for about an hour at room temp and then went into the fridge, so it continued to ferment and rise. And that cold, long fermentation helps to develop flavor. And the shaping process is sort of a 2-step process. We do a pre-shape and then a shape. So you can see it's about twice as big as it was after mixing. I'm gonna pat it down and now I'm gonna use my bench scraper to divide the dough and I'm gonna weigh out 4-ounce portions. So I should have, I think, around 6 portions. It doesn't have to be exact though. So this will make 6 kind of like 8-inch long hoagie rolls. So I'm just gonna set aside the portions. So I have 7 actually, and each of them is a little bit more than 4 ounces. So it's really more like 4.1, 4.2. So I'm just distributing the last little bits of dough all the way around. So now I have everything divided equally, but I want to do a step that's called pre-shaping. So if I were to try to take each portion of dough and get it into that classic like torpedo hoagie shape, I'd have a hard time because I would end up overworking it and it would want to just spring back. So we do the shaping in 2 steps to try to not only get the best, most regular shape possible so that it rises evenly, but also so that it's just easier to work with the dough. So I'm going to start by just kind of getting everything together. So see how I have like lots of loose bits of dough? I'm going to basically tuck those inside the larger piece of dough and gather up the ends. Sometimes I talk about it like a garlic bulb, like it looks like this, or like a soup dumpling. And then you go seam side down and just give it a little rub. Because this is such a stiff dough, that like lower hydration, it's so easy to work with. You don't need any bench flour really. In fact, bench flour will hurt you because it's going to prevent friction between the dough and the surface, and then you won't get this kind of like tightening effect. Again, this is the pre-shape. So I'll show you again. Take any little smaller bits of dough, kind of tuck them into the center of the larger piece, and then gather up all the ends and bring them toward each other on one side. Pinch together, and then seam side down, and just press. And it's sort of like a cupping motion with your hand around the dough, and I'm making just like little circles. But this doesn't have to be that perfect. You just want all the dough gathered into like a nice, tight, even bundle. And I'm also pressing down with my hand to increase that friction with the surface. So this dough is particularly stiff because it's cold straight from the fridge. But it's gonna warm up a little bit. And then it's really gonna warm up while we do the proofing stage. If you're actually finding that because your dough is so stiff, and especially because it's cold, that you're actually not getting enough friction between the dough and the surface, so like it's just not, like you're not getting the dough to stick to itself because it's not, you're not able to kind of like use the surface to help you, spritz it with a little water and kind of like spread it around. And that's gonna really help. So just like that. Okay, so now we have to let this rest. This is called a bench rest. This is what you do between the pre-shaping and the shaping. And the bench rest doesn't have to be more than 5 or 10 minutes. You just want the gluten to relax a little bit. And then we're gonna move on to the final shaping, and I'll show you how to get that nice like torpedo or like batard shape for your rolls.
Submarine shaped.
Sub shape, sure. So after my bench rest, I'm ready to show you the shaping. And actually, I put everything right in the middle. I'm gonna move it off to the side so I can show you right here how we're gonna do the shaping.
And you didn't puff it.
No, so they're still pretty cold from the fridge, so there isn't any proofing going on yet, which is good, that's what we want. We want them to proof after shaping. Anytime you're making a elongated bread shape, this is sort of a similar shaping process. So it's like if I were making baguette, I would do this, but I would just make them much longer and skinnier. I'm gonna turn it over, so round it side down, and I'm gonna flatten it with the like, what is this, the heel of my hand? And I'm sort of flattening it into an oval rather than a circle. Okay, you know what? I want my rolling pin, actually. So using my rolling pin to help flatten it, because again, this is a stiffer dough, into sort of an elongated oval shape. And I have it lengthwise, like left to right. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take the top part of the dough, stop moving, and I'm gonna fold it down toward the center and kind of press in with my fingertips. See that? Now I'm gonna do 180 degrees, and I'm gonna bring this top part down into the center as well. So see how I have the two sort of long sides folded inward. And now I'm going to fold the entire thing in half toward me. So bringing the top half down, and I'm gonna use the heel of my hand again to sort of seal the dough together against the bench. So if I turn it around, you can see what I have here. And I actually need to pinch really, really well because this is such a stiff dough. It doesn't stick that well to each other. So again, if you need to, give yourself a little water. So I have this seam and this little, like, what do you call this shape? What kind of a shape is this?
Cylinder?
Sure. I have this kind of, it's like a tapered cylinder. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it on that seam side, okay? And I'm gonna roll it out into a torpedo shape, and I want it to be like around 7 inches long. So I'm already at probably, you know, I'm at almost 5 inches. So I just wanna elongate it a little bit. And I wanna maintain these tapered ends as well. A slight taper for the final roll, okay? So use the kind of fleshy part of your palms, and we're gonna press down against the table and roll. And roll from the center outward. And know that this dough is gonna spring back a little bit, so you can see I went kind of past that length. And so now I'm at 5, just about at 7 inches. I'm gonna actually just give it one more little roll, a little water on the table for friction to help it lengthen. So you can see there's that seam. You want it to be seam side down. That looks good. So now this is the final shape, and I'm going to place it on parchment paper here. So I'm gonna basically use the parchment to slide the dough into the oven. This goes seam side down on my parchment, and I wanna keep this covered so that it doesn't get dried out. This is a very sort of slightly damp towel. I'm gonna put that down. And now I'm gonna repeat that process with my 6 remaining pieces of dough. I'll show you one more time. And it'll get easier as I go along because the later pieces are gonna be a little bit more rested. So I'm gonna take my ball of dough, turn it over. I'm gonna use my rolling pin to lengthen it and flatten it. Okay. Then working with lengthwise left to right, I'm gonna take the top and press it down into the center, like that midline of the dough. Then same thing, 180 degrees. Take the top of the dough and press that now down toward the midline. And I like to really press, not only to seal the seam, but to make a kind of like indentation where the dough will naturally fold onto itself when I go to fold it in half the final time. So here, now I'm gonna take it and fold the top down onto the bottom half, using the heel of my hand to really seal it together. So here I have that seam. I'm gonna pinch really, really well to seal it. Use a little water if you need to. So now I have my seam. I'm gonna put seam side down. Give it a little press. If you need, a little water on the surface. And now we're gonna roll. So again, I'm applying a lot of pressure. I'm starting in the center with the palms of my hands and working out. And I'm applying more pressure at the ends to maintain sort of that tapered shape. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now onto my parchment. Now I'm only gonna fit 4 on this side, even though I have 7 total, because I don't want to place them too close together because they're going to expand in the oven. So I'm gonna have to do 2 different sheets of parchment. So now I'm just gonna do the rest and get them on my sheet tray on the parchment paper, and then I set up a little bit of a proofing station, so I'll show you sort of what that proof looks like when I'm all done shaping. I can't say it and not hear my mom's side of the family saying it with a Baltimore accent.
Try it with a Baltimore accent.
Hoagie. What would my Aunt Joan say? She'd be like, "Hun, you want a hoagie?" She's like, "It's hot, so use a tail." This is a tail. Let me show you what I have here. So I have all 7 portions, nicely shaped. They're resting on that seam. I'm gonna spray them with a little tiny bit of water just to keep some moisture on there. And now we wanna let them proof. So I'm gonna keep them covered with this towel. It's just dry in here. I'm probably gonna spritz the top of the towel with a little bit of water. And now we're in this very, very old barn kitchen where it's like 0 degrees outside and it's pretty cold in here. So I have a proofing station set up because I don't want this to take forever. So we're looking for these to not quite, but almost double in size, like between 50 and 75% expanded in size. And if I were to just leave them at room temp, which is cold, it would take forever. So I have a little space heater over by the kitchen table, and I'm gonna put them in front of that, where it's gonna be more like a toasty 80. I'm hoping that this proof takes like an hour or so. So about an hour and a half of proofing. I'll show you what the dough looks like. You can see that they've puffed really nicely. And one thing that I kept doing, because there was literally like hot air blowing, like dry hot air blowing onto them, I kept giving the towel a little bit of a spritz, and even the dough itself a little bit of a spritz so it didn't dry out. You just don't want that like thick skin to form on top. But when I give them a poke, I can feel that there's air inside. So I think that we're in a good place with the proof. Now my oven is preheated. I have my made in carbon steel griddle positioned in the center of the oven, and then I have a rack down below. I do want to bake these with a little bit of steam. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of water heating up in, I have the made in enameled cast iron. I'm gonna get a little water heating in here, and I'm gonna put it on the rack underneath the griddle. And it's just gonna help to make sure that I have like maximum expansion of the dough when it first goes into the oven. So I'm just gonna get a little water going in here. So I'm just gonna heat this up. So I have my water that's gonna come up to like a simmer. I just want it to be steaming. I'm gonna put that underneath the baking steel. I have 7 rolls, and I need to slide them like side by side onto the griddle, which I'm using as a baking steel. So I'm gonna trim the parchment a little bit so that I can try to fit all of them. So this is called a lame. It's basically a curved double-sided razor blade. And I'm gonna use this to do one long slash down the center of each piece of dough. So these are going to bake on the parchment, and the parchment is gonna be my vehicle for getting the dough onto the griddle. So they're gonna stay on the parchment and bake there. This is coming up. I'm gonna get this into the oven. So my oven is on 450. I'm gonna go ahead and slash the rolls. This is a relatively stiff dough, so it's not actually terribly difficult to do that slash. This one dragged a little because the dough is a little wet. Ooh, that one dragged. So these are ready to go in the oven. It's preheated to 450. I've had the griddle in there. That's gonna act as my baking steel. I have my steam underneath, and I'm gonna slide the parchment onto the preheated griddle, but just one piece at a time. Oh, I'm so not fitting those other 3 on here. Or maybe I am. Oh, no way. Oh, no way. I can only fit 2. I once had raw hoagie roll that did not have space on the griddle. So the 7th one's gonna have to get baked later, but that's okay. So I have 6 in the oven. They smell done. They have that like magical bread smell. And I just took a peek. They're golden brown all over. So I'm gonna pull them out. What was it, 20 minutes? 20-minute bake?
We could say 20. It's been like 16.
16, that's it? 17? Okay, well, close enough. I'm gonna pull the whole griddle out because I'm gonna use it for, of course, cooking the chopped cheese. They look really good. Ooh. All right, so here are the rolls. When I pick them up, I mean, they're super hot. I have some nice, like subtle bubbling and blistering on the surface. So that's how I know they were like nicely fermented. They opened up along that seam. And when I pick it up, it's pretty light for its size. So golden brown on the bottom. They look really good. I'm super excited. They smell amazing. So these need to cool. I'm gonna just get them onto the work surface to cool. Basically what happens during cooling is the steam that's trapped inside kind of migrates out, and it softens the outer part of the bread. So I just wanna let these cool, and then I'm gonna get my griddle actually onto my stove, and I'm gonna start prepping for the chopped cheese. So I need to shred some lettuce, cut some tomato. I was gonna do onion. Is that heretical, do you think, to add? Are they gonna come with pitchforks for me? They, I don't know. New Yorkers, please, I want to be one of you. So I'm gonna get my griddle back onto my stovetop. It's still really hot, but love that it goes from oven to stovetop and vice versa. And I'm gonna prep everything for the chopped cheese. And because I know myself, I'm leaving a towel right here so that I don't touch it.
Camera cuts.
You know what the other thing is? I really should have the mayo and the ketchup in squeeze bottles. It's fine. Well, it's just, you know, more authentic. I'm gonna start by prepping my veg, so to speak. And I'm gonna add a little bit of onion. I think a lot of places onions are not mixed in with the patty, but I'm gonna do that here. I think some places they are. So I'm gonna do this into like a big dice, basically, and get these going. I'm gonna actually start preheating my griddle. And I'm gonna do one as like a warming station and one hot zone. So I can start my onions and then I can kind of move those off to the side and then do the beef. I might not even need, this half an onion might be all I need. I'll do the whole thing. I don't have to use them all. So I used to be someone that thought like you should only use tomatoes on a sandwich if it's like an actual ripe summer tomato. And Harris has actually kind of like educated me on the idea that there is a use for out of season unripe tomatoes. And generally those uses are like sometimes on a hamburger and or other sandwich. So I'm gonna thinly slice this tomato. Basically I don't have a problem using this otherwise like pretty sad, non-juicy tomato. It adds like a little acidity, a little texture. In fact, I even kind of like it. So I have my American cheese here. Yellow American. In the like classic squares. Okay, now I'm just gonna shred some iceberg lettuce. Now I'm going to season my patty. Just gonna do some salt and pepper. So this is an 80-20 ground beef. All right, and now I'm gonna get my onions going on my griddle. Once the onions are softened and starting to brown a little bit, I'm gonna move those to the cool side, get my patty on, start chopping up, then kind of mix everything together. Cheese goes on, and then when it's melted, that's when it's ready. And while I'm waiting on that, I can also kind of prep my bread. So I'm gonna get a little oil down. I always like when the cooks like spread out the oil. So I have the griddle over 2 burners. The burner closest to me is my hot zone, so I have that heat turned up. And then the far burner is just on low, so that's more of just like where to keep things warm. So as soon as the onions are a little more softened, I can move those to the warm zone, just to hang out while I get the beef going. So my onions are browned around the edges, or softened. I'm gonna move them to the warm zone. They can just hang out over there. And now I'm gonna get my patty going. I'm gonna bring the onions over. All right, I'm gonna put the cheese on. So my chopped cheese mixture is ready. I'm going to take one of the cooled hoagie rolls, and it has softened a little bit, which is nice. So you can see like how the crust has that crackliness, but the crumb inside is nice and soft. And there's still like a good heft to it, so I know it can stand up to a lot of filling. Now the key to hoagies is not cutting all the way through. So I'm not splitting it, I'm leaving it hinged on one side. Let's take a look at that interior. This looks so good. Perfect crumb for containing all the stuff in my chopped cheese. I'm gonna give it some mayo and some ketchup. I wish I were set up the way that they are at like the bodega or the deli, where it's just like a squeeze bottle. I'm making it a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. Also, I'm a ketchup fanatic, so I really like a lot of ketchup. All right, now I'm gonna go in, and the key is like the scoop and spread. Oh God. There we go, there we go. Ow, just burned my hand. Okay, oh, smells incredible. Oh, look at the cheese. Oh, the cheese, gooey, looks so good. All right, I'm gonna get my tomatoes in and shredded lettuce on top. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Let's see a cross section. There's the cross section. I love like a hot cold thing. Meat and cheese and onions, cold tomato lettuce. Frankly, could use more mayo and ketchup. But once you try it, you are gonna understand why this is like an obsession. The bread is great. There's kind of a softness to it, like a moisture content that's nice. It's not dry, but it has a nice tight crumb. So it really is there to like contain the sandwich. It can soak up the juices from the beef. And then the outside has just that right kind of crackliness, like a very thin kind of crackly crust, and right underneath is the crumb. Kind of made it a little extra special and put my twist on it by making my own hoagie rolls. You could make these rolls at home and do your version of like an Italian sub, or you know, any number of sort of like cold cuts and cheese combination is great, whether you call it a grinder or a sub or a hoagie, whatever. It's kind of the perfect base for any number of sandwiches and applications. And I made it in the oven on my made-in carbon steel griddle, which acted as a baking steel, and then I was able to bring that up stovetop and put together the chopped cheese filling. So I want to thank our friends at Made In for sponsoring this episode. Go to the link in the description below, madeincookware.com, for a discount off your order. Check out their entire line of carbon steel, but especially the griddle, which I love using at home. And it feels really good to be back. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.